January the 29th, 2019, we left the European Union. Many of us had spent a lifetime with that ambition and goal. Many others found themselves bereft at the result of the referendum back in 2016. Did you know? I can't even remember that. It was 16, wasn't it? Yeah, 2016. Well, we're 5 years on now, and one of the things many people would have said to you when criticism was coming in about the eventual Brexit deal was it will take years before we know whether it's been successful or not. And indeed, it probably still will take years to know if we've been successful or not. But it seems an appropriate moment, not least because I won't be here on January the 29th, for us to ask, has Brexit been a success? Are you disappointed or are you pleased? 0344 499 1000. And that is precisely the question I'm going to put to, with some sense of knowing what's coming, Mathew Hulbert, Lib Dem activist.
Well, I mean, of course, I'm very sad. I mean, I think it was the greatest act of self-harm in many a long year for our country, but it was how people voted, so you know it is what it is. But I'm not an economist, but what I hear from economists whenever I see them on the TV is that thus far at least none of the wonderful things that we were promised by the Brexiteers have come to be. So what I'm told is that it's been a bit of a disaster, and of course I'm not surprised that that's the case.
Amy, how do you feel?
Okay, so whilst you say that none of the wonderful things that the economists promised have come to be, I'd push back on that and say, well, the skies didn't fall in either. And I actually say that as somebody who voted Remain, by the way. So I think at this point I'm just sort of profoundly bored by the fact that we're still debating whether there should be a reverse of Brexit or not. Because again, as you said, look, it was a democratic vote. People voted to leave. As I say, I happen to vote to Remain, but that's what a democracy is. The country spoke, we left, the sky has not, as I can make out, fallen in. There has been no plague of locusts. It's probably still going to take another few years yet to really see what the outcome is. So,
but democracy didn't end there, did it? And if it had gone the other way, do you really think that the Brexiteers would have said, well, OK, Remain have won, well done Remain, we're going to focus on something? Of course they wouldn't have. They'd have carried on their campaign to leave.
I take your point. You know, let's take another democracy, i.e., you know, changes of government in this country. We have one every 5 years. So are you seriously saying that we should rerun a Brexit vote every 5 years?
No, but I think eventually there should be one. And Lib Dem policy actually is that eventually we should rejoin, but we're talking about quite a long time. But what Ed Davey said this week, and I was pleased to see it from my party leader, was that there should be a new customs union arrangement between the UK and the EU. And I think that's just economic common sense. And the Brexiteers may, you know, shake their fist at it, but it's just sense.
I won't shake my fist at you, I promise, but let's just have a look at the economic common sense of it. So I don't know specifically what he's talking about, because the customs union is quite a unique arrangement to have now when they have the full single market and obviously full membership of the union. Turkey, for
I worked
example.
in the Northern Ireland office and trying to work out exactly border crossings and where the border was in this state. I mean, that it's not. I appreciate your political point about what Avey said, but sort of we're almost seeing some kind of renegotiation of custody is.
And you're quite right. And let's keep it top line, because basically Ed Davey wants the country to rejoin the EU. Okay, so I think that's a distraction.
All right position to take, isn't it?
But you said because of the economic failures. How do you explain then, for example, post-COVID? Post-Ukraine, well, not post-Ukraine, obviously post the huge impact of Ukraine, but hopefully in the final stages of Ukraine. Last year, we had the fastest growing economy in the G7 of EU countries. And curiously enough, and I don't quote the IMF very often because they're often wrong, they're saying that will possibly be the case in 2025 as well.
And I don't mean to sort of pile onto you, Mathew, but there has been a very frightening lurch to the right in quite a lot of Europe. So the fact that we're not sort of bound to some quite scary political things that are happening there, because of the many criticisms I would make of the current government, I don't think they've got any sense of being a mad fascist about them. So I'm glad we're not to be bound into that.
I tell you what, though, but there's someone who wants.
Thank goodness for that.
There is someone who wants us to return to the European Union, who is bound to all these strange parties out there in Europe, not himself. Of course, I'm talking about former President of the EU Council at the time of Brexit, Donald Tusk, now Prime Minister of Poland, where Keir Starmer visited only, I think it was yesterday. And watch Keir Starmer squirm as you watch and listen to what Donald Tusk had to say about the future of Britain and the EU.
I am aware this is a dream of mine.
Breturn.
That instead of a Brexit, we will have a Breturn. Perhaps I am labouring under an illusion. I'd rather be an optimist and harbour these dreams in my heart. Sometimes they come true in politics. But of course, we need the maximum rapprochement of Great Britain and the European Union.
It's interesting, isn't it? The European Union, or at least Donald Tusk there, he'd welcome us back. And actually, I didn't think there was any humility when we came out 5 years ago from the European Union asking themselves, how was it that their wonderful dream of the EU was so bad that they lost their second most powerful economic force who voted to leave it? They never even questioned that. They just decided to punish us, didn't they?
Well, I think that's sort of understandable in the sense that, you know, if one part chooses to leave another sort of still coalesced entity, of course the coalesced entity is going to have the groupthink of, well, those guys have decided to gone off. They must be the ones who are wrong. So in that sense, I kind of
well, I think a bit of humility might have actually helped us all. But yeah, I take your point.
Where's the humility from the Brexiteers? Where's their humility?
Oh well, I'll give you a very good example.
Where's your humility?
Of course, no, the humility was very well said. Steve Baker actually said it as a former negotiator. I was in the negotiating room when I was working with Dominic Raab, and we've always said we underestimated the unity of the EU and their unity of purpose. We've been very clear about that, and I think Steve Baker showed that humility very much so when it was there. But shall I tell you what I think's been the most successful thing about Brexit? And it's what I voted on. It was the democratic accountability. No government in the UK had anywhere to hide. Boris Johnson's government had nowhere to hide. Rishi Sunak had nowhere to hide. They were punished by the voters. In the past, they've been able to point to Europe and say, but they did that, they did that. That's a good thing. We choose our government with no interference, Mathew. That's what a Democrat is.
That is just about the only good thing that I think we got out of Brexit. I'd return to the EU tomorrow personally, but I think it's going to be probably
Listen, I have to thank you both now. We're coming to the top of the hour. Mathew Hulbert, Lib Dem activist. Amy Fisher, former Director of Comms at the Conservative Party. Thanks so much for a brilliant first hour.